It's Anthony Fantano here. You know who it is. We're going to be listening to a new episode of the Needle Drop Podcast. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you for watching. Just letting you guys know that before the podcast plays, a little preface here. You can support this podcast by hitting up our support page, link down there in the description box, small monthly fee, up-to-date episodes of the podcast sent straight to your email inbox. Cool. And if you want to hear older episodes, we have backlogged episodes on iTunes. Link to subscribe to our iTunes feed down there in the description too. You can also hit up our Amazon Associates link. Anything you buy on Amazon, if you live in the US, we get kickback from that. That helps support the podcast as well. And I think that's all I got to say. We have Spencer Hazard from Full of Hell on this episode. We're going to be talking about the Merzbow collaboration that they did, the Body collaboration they have coming up, music coming up in the future, extreme music in general, and there's also a weird, persistent static noise that occurs periodically throughout, not periodically, pretty consistently at some points through the podcast. It's not too loud. I think the spirit of Merzbow was in the room as we were doing the interview. Like his spirit was in the room, bringing some noise. So, and whatever this sound was, I have not been able to recreate it since this podcast, so it really was a special moment. Hopefully it doesn't distract too much from what we're talking about. It doesn't sound like it does to me, but, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments if it is for you, and if it is, I apologize. You guys are the best. Check out Full of Hell. Look forward to the new Body collaboration. Here we go.
Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and you are listening to the latest episode of the Needle Drop Podcast, where we talk to content creators, musicians, artists of various shapes, sizes, and shades. And in this episode, we have the one and only Spencer Hazard of the band Full of Hell, one of the most notoriously noisy and abrasive bands right now on the planet. How are you doing, dude?
Oh, pretty good.
All right, let's talk about the last full-length album that you guys had come out a while ago, that I talked about a little bit on the channel. I'm sure some of my listeners here are familiar with it. It was a collaborative album with a Japanese noise artist and producer, Merzbow. And from my understanding, that whole connection kind of came as a result of a t-shirt you guys had made, or was it something else?
It was actually, the t-shirt was later on. Like, the collaboration had been talked about for a while, but we emailed Masami just to make sure, being like, hey man, we're gonna we really want to use this image, and he was like, as long as you send me a couple, I'm cool with it. And then when we first actually met him in person in Tokyo, his wife was wearing the t-shirt to the show.
That's funny.
Yeah, but we got connected with him because we were playing a show in Brooklyn, and this random Hungarian guy came up to our drummer, or our bass player at the time, actually, and was just like, hey man, awesome set, blah blah blah. And he was just like, yeah, I know Merzbow, I play live with him sometimes. And we're just like, oh yeah, cool, all right man. We didn't think anything of it. And he emailed us later, and he was like, hey man, I showed Masami your guys' stuff, and he really wants to work with you guys. So that's how that whole thing came about.
And I mean, your music is very blatantly influenced by grindcore, punk, power violence, metal as well. Just a lot of extreme rock in general, which, I mean, there's been no shortage of for a long time. I mean, what is it, if he's described it to you, that sort of made him gravitate toward you guys through this, acquaintance that you had met out of the blue? I'm
not really sure, because apparently he keeps up on new music. Surprisingly, Balaj is the name of his live drummer, and he said that one of his favorite current bands is Bring Me the Horizon, Masami's is.
Really?
So, he knows about everything that's going on. Anything new, old, he's a fan of it. So I don't know, we're lucky to be able to work with him. I mean, it's an honor. I don't see why we're special compared to another grind or current day power violence, noisy hardcore band. But I mean, I'm not complaining. It's awesome.
It's just addressing that. That's a pretty funny presumption that I think just about any fan of alternative music would probably make about him. That he's that he's probably not listening to Bring Me the Horizon. That he's probably just holed up listening to noise all day, or just, I don't know, listening to running refrigerators and then using that as inspiration or something. I mean, obviously an exaggeration, but to just think that he's listening to Bring Me the Horizon, I think a lot of people would find pretty funny.
Yeah, the last time we played with him as well, he was wearing a Gorguts t-shirt, and we were just like, oh man, that's cool, like, because we're all fans of Gorguts. But then he like turned around, we saw the back dates, and it was like dates for like a small East Coast tour, like Wilmington, Delaware was one of the dates, and like we don't live too far from there, and we're just like, that's so random that he would have a t-shirt from like that tour of all tours.
Talking about, more about the creative process between you two guys, it's kind of interesting to have heard you two collaborate, because even though you both make abrasive music, at least to my ears, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like it comes from a different place philosophically or emotionally. When I listen to Full of Hell, it very much sounds like the music, though abrasive, it's coming from an aggressive place. It's coming from an animalistic place. Whereas Merzbow, it's almost like more of a place of, I don't know, lack of emotion or maybe nihilism or something.
Yeah, I think that as well. Like, but I mean, he doesn't really talk either, so it's hard to tell where his like influences or what emotion is affecting what music at the time. Because I mean, you can tell he is emotionally invested in some of his music, because a lot of it is based on like him being a vegan. Like, he has whole series of music like dedicated to like the trials and tribulations of like factory farming, or like the issues with killing dolphins in Japan. Like, he has whole albums dedicated to that. So it does come from a place that like affects him emotionally, I think. But like, then again, I can't speak for him.
And when he sort of came to collaborate with you guys on the songs, was the writing process, I guess, was he looped in on the writing process from beginning to end, or did you sort of have him add on to ideas that the band had already kind of preconceived?
The way he did it was, he said we had free reign to do what we want. So we basically wrote an LP. Then he sent us 2 hours, just one whole track, 2 hours long, of just different noises he was doing. And it was just basically like, do what you want with this and add it to your music.
Cool.
Whereas like, I know some people, like, it's been a complaint, and like, I like, looking back, I wish he did have more like involvement in like the first half of the LP. Like, he is on almost every song. It's just like, the way it's mixed, it blends in a little too much with our style. But with the second LP as well, like, we just like wanted to take more of what he was doing and like have him be in the forefront.
Are you talking about the Sister Fawn?
Yes.
Like EP that followed the record?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that point, it's kind of like you're sampling him or using him as an instrument, which, I mean, if he's doing that compliantly, that's part of the creative process.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So moving forward, you guys have this new record coming down the pipe. It's another collaboration, but it's with a group who also makes abrasive music, but it very much comes from a place that is obviously aggressive, obviously primal, much in the same way that your music is, but a little bit more on kind of the freakish end of the spectrum, the band The Body.
Yeah.
So give us a bit of a heads up as to, and I've already showed many people who are listening to the show, the song that had been released, the Little Death track, which was super intense, super hellish. Is that, kind of setting precedent for the rest of the record, or are there more surprises in store for this record? Give us a bit of a heads up in terms of what we can kind of expect out of this thing.
There's a lot more surprises. There's a Leonard Cohen cover on that album.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
There's like some straight up just harsh noise tracks. There's like a noise grind track where Chip from The Body's doing vocals while it's just like crazy free range like blast beats. There's more of the stuff where they do where there's like sampling the vocals. Like we have a track where it's like very beat driven, but he samples Chrissy, who has collaborated on multiple Body albums. Like her vocals make up the whole melody of the song. There's a lot of like, we wanted to take it to like more Godflesh Swans influence, but then like Lee from the Body was just like, I just don't want it to be a ripoff like industrial metal records. So like it's all over the place, but it flows.
Well, I mean, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so you're talking about, you know, this discussion as to where the album should move stylistically. Was it a bit of an issue to kind of reach a consensus or see eye to eye on a lot of decisions? You know, sort of bringing another collaborator in, because you're talking about Merzbow, you know, essentially handing over these sounds and then saying, do what you will, you know. But it seems like this creative process, you know, the band was more directly involved in every step of the way.
Yeah, like we had no ideas. We just like, we had done a month-long tour together, and at the end of the month-long tour, we're just like, all right, let's go into the studio for a week. No ideas or nothing. The first day, it was kind of stressful because I was bringing like some riff ideas to the table, and just every single idea was getting shot down. So like, I was just like, well, what am I going to do? Like this album. But then like, as the days progressed, it just like flowed more and more and became easier and easier to just like get everything done.
And specifically, are there a lot of vocal surprises on the album, or, you know, sort of where do the vocal contributions lie from each group? Because the Body's vocals do tend to run super freakish, and they were definitely that on that little death track.
I think they're equal, like in a sense, like it's not one vocalist overpowering the other. And like I said, there's like some clean vocals like sampled on there as well.
And talking about that cover, let's go back to that for just a second. How exactly do you take a Leonard Cohen song and kind of translate it into such a, I guess, an extreme sound? You know, unless you guys kind of tamper that down a little bit for your version. I mean, how do you sort of make sure that while translating it into something that your music and the Body's music that can be so aggressive, so abstract, sort of maintain the original spirit of the track?
We like, it's a very like close cover. Like it's like leans close to like the original, but it is taken from like the Body's perspective. I'm pretty sure, I think it was our singer's idea, Dylan. He like has always wanted to cover Leonard Cohen in our band, and I think he took that opportunity for like such an extreme experimental avant album to be like, all right, let's do this. But I would say like, think of like how Sun covered For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Sure.
Basically think of Sun covering Leonard Cohen. It's just like very stripped down, just vocals and guitar and some like electronics behind it. So it's just like super blown out guitars, still playing what Leonard Cohen's playing, just like drop down like 10 steps.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, the upcoming record, the track sounds great. What you're telling me sounds really interesting. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening that are pretty excited to hear it. So let's move on to talk about just extreme music now in general, you know, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Extreme rock, extreme noise music. For years, it's sort of had this reputation for just kind of pushing the envelope. And, you know, for you guys, is that sort of a conscious effort that you continue to do, or is it kind of more about just kind of keeping the sound and keeping this idea alive just out of kind of a passion for it?
I think it's kind of a passion, and just like the more we play and the more we keep touring and like dealing with like people and just like touring experiences and just like seeing how different like trends are and stuff, it like makes us want to go more and more extreme and get angrier and angrier. Like, I know that sounds cliche, but like it's the truth. Every time we like write a record, it's not like, oh, we need to like top this, like we need to make it more extreme. It's just like it happens kind of thing.
Is that because the where you previously were isn't giving you the thrill that it did just not too long ago, so do you need to push it even further?
Yeah, basically. Like, I mean, like, into anytime we like write a record, like as soon as we're done with it, like I end up hating the songs that we wrote. I'm just like, it could have been more extreme, it could have been better, like, you know, like just like I know probably like every musician goes through that, just like
Sure.
I could have done this differently, and it like pushes me to be like, all right, like, you know.
And so this extremity that you guys see you put yourselves, you know, pushing yourselves into, you know, does this come from the sorts of places that we typically expect them to in genres like metalcore and power violence and grindcore, or are you guys experimenting a little more with? You were just saying that you were experimenting with some electronics on this record. You know, do you see yourselves sort of bringing sounds from more alternative places? You know, kind of outside of the general rock instrumentation world to sort of continue to fill your sound out and just make it more abrasive?
Yeah, I think so, because even in like live settings, like we've started using more like synth instruments and keyboards and like more samples and stuff. I think that's going to have more place in recordings, but like I have gotten more into guitar oriented music, just like, you know, more technical death metal type stuff like has sparked my interest more. So I want to take influences from that, because before it was just like, you know, typical like just power violence grind stuff like power chords, but now that I'm just like I want to actually have the guitar not be so much of a background instrument compared to like the rest of our records. Because anytime we would write a record, before I would write the guitar parts, I would think about like other instrumentation or how the drums are going to sound, and the guitar was more of like a back thought to me. But now I'm like, while we write new stuff, I think of like the guitar parts before I think of anything else.
And so you're talking about adding more synthetic elements into the music. You know, how in your mind is it important to make sure that you know, the synths that you're finding, the electronic elements that you're finding, that they kind of maintain a level of grime to them, because the drums, the vocals, the guitars especially, they do kind of have a very abrasive buzzsaw kind of feeling. You know, how do you sort of make sure that those synthetic elements are sort of as ugly in a way?
I don't think it's like, I think noise has to be ugly, but like when it comes to like keyboards and stuff, I don't think it has to necessarily be ugly. Because even like, look at a band like the classic like death metal band Nocturnus, like they had traditional keyboard parts, but it was still like crazy death metal underneath of it. But he wasn't playing like super blown out. He was playing like pretty synth, like for the time, like keyboard parts. Like he was using what was available and just using those sounds, not really manipulating it, and it gave the music like a whole different like spacey atmosphere. Like I think that could like be cool in our music, or like I said, you know, like it could be blown out and, you know, help our music. But yeah, I would like to experiment and, you know, just have any type of synth keyboard sound. I think
to create like kind of a contrast, you know, something melodic,
exactly.
something harmonious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like to like just give it like a whole different vibe to it, whereas like the guitars could be grinding and drums be blasting, and it just like gives it a whole like different like dimensional feel to the entire song.
Earlier when you were talking about some inspirations that might have been going into this upcoming record with the body, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Swans. I mean, not too long ago I found an '83 pressing of Filth, and I picked it up on vinyl, and it's just so funny how something so old just sounds so hellish and extreme and freaky today. And I don't know, I think it seems almost to me like the antithesis, or sort of against the ethos of some of this music, to start looking backwards, because obviously we're noisier today, we're more aggressive today, but you know, there's still something about that record that I think there are probably albums today that are kind of missing, that try to take an aggressive approach.
That exactly, like look at like albums like that had nothing to look back on. It was made out of like pure like artistic endeavor. Like they created these ugly recordings and stuff, and like whereas like a band like that could come out today can look back and say like, oh, like I can listen to this and this and this is my influences, where an album coming out in the 70s or 80s that's completely disgusting, it's just, you know, made from the heart, like nothing was influencing it except for like their musical like endeavor or whatever.
You know, that's a that's a really great point, you know, and I think something that your average rock musician today, whether they know it or not, probably struggles with at least a little bit. You know, I mean, while rock music is great, it's past. It's very dense and it's a very rich past. You know, almost kind of haunts everybody who picks up a guitar today.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's kind of like you want to have those authentic, you know, sort of artistic expressions that seemingly come out of nowhere, but simultaneously somebody's going to compare you to something, especially considering on the internet they have access to everything. And, you know, with everybody having just every commercially recorded song in history at their fingertips, it's almost like musicians can kind of overload themselves on stuff, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think that needs to be a goal for, like, modern day bands. I mean, it's one of our goals. Like, of course we wear our influences on our sleeve, but, like, we also want to be able to create something that people can look back on and be like, you know, like, it stands the test of time kind of thing. Like, we don't want people to be like, oh, this was, like, you know, flash in the pan, like, heat of the moment, like, type band. Like, we want to, like, do something where it's just, like, you know, like I said, stand the test of time, like, actually, like, because, I mean, there's a ton of bands, like, that, like, one or two out of a genre will stick out, and then the rest, unless someone is, like, a complete, like, music nerd, like, or is, like, completely infatuated with the genre, will never find out about.
Well, that's another thing to sort of ask about. I mean, even though the music industry and sort of the art of music and creating music is very different today in comparison with the process and music culture in the 80s, you know, there are some things that have certainly carried over in today. I mean, with pop music, for example, pop music was on a pedestal. It was very popular in the 80s as well as any other decade, and it's very popular today. You know, it's in the limelight. There's shine on it. There's really no difference between then and today in that respect. But with extreme music, the community decades ago used to be so insular. It was so shadowy. It was so, you know, under the radar. And now with the internet, it kind of seems like anybody can just kind of casually access it just as easily as they sort of access anything else, you know? Is the fact that the internet has kind of removed the shadows away from this community in a sense affected the music at all, or sort of taken away a sort of mystery that it might have needed to kind of maintain an appeal?
I mean, I don't think necessarily, because there are still some, like, I mean, look at it like a label like Youth Attack, like, just has no, like, they have a website, but none of the bands have any internet presence at all, and, like, half the bands release their albums on cassettes or 8-tracks. So, like, you know, it's still, like, still people are creating music that, like, you have to dig for kind of thing. It's just not presented to you just because, like, through YouTube. Like, some bands, like I said, you got to actually, like, dig for it or know somebody, like, and to be able to listen to it. Like, there's plenty of bands, like, I've seen live YouTube videos for, but I cannot find the demos or listen to any of their, like, studio recordings, because they'll make, like, a demo of 20 and be sold out, and you'll never hear from it ever again.
You know, I hear more and more of that stuff going on. Like, it seems like there's some artists and some labels out there that just through word of mouth I find out about, because in one way or another they've kind of said, fuck this internet shit. Which, I mean, in one sense, I think the internet is great. You know, it allows people like me and people like you to do what we're doing. But simultaneously, it has its downsides too. And I feel like the further we go into this decade, we're sort of finding those ways out, the ways the internet isn't exactly fair to musicians and the creative process. And I could foresee maybe sort of musicians and music fans as well, who are really looking for something authentic and looking for somebody who's doing something abstract and interesting, searching for that offline eventually, because what's going online might turn out to be so homogenized 5 years from now.
And I think too with stuff like you hear a lot of problems with like record store day, like people are actually going to have to search for like truly unique underground music, because even the record stores are becoming oversaturated again with like just stereotypical like run of the mill like pop, like getting pressed a million times. Like we've even had to deal with it, like our records being like pushed back and pushed back and pushed back because all the major like vinyl pressing plants have to deal with like the overcrowding of all the major market labels just like releasing stuff, like reissuing unnecessary crap, or just like repressing stuff that has been like repressed already a million times. So like to find something authentic now, I think you actually have to like go to like a small record store, or actually go figure out where these bands are playing live to be able to pick out their music and stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of the downside of the popularity of vinyl right now. The downside of vinyl's comeback. It doesn't seem like with records becoming popular again that more record pressing plants have opened or something, so as a result, a lot of artists that I know and I talk with, because I review their music and I'm sort of on a person-to-person basis with them, tell me that, I have to delay my record again, my self-released record again, because with a lot of these pressing plants, the artists that are signed to labels, or the artists that they sell more copies than me, or they have a bigger rapport with, sort of take priority, and they've already taken half my money, and I just have to wait for them to finish the pressing, and then I give them the other half.
Yeah, and then too, by the time like, and I mean stuff like records leaking is inevitable, and like I don't care, like we will put our records for free online after like a certain amount of months anyway, but like as you're sitting there waiting for the record to come out, it's like more than likely that your music's going to get released anyway. So like it's like I feel like having a record out is like something to show for your art, and like that's a pride moment kind of thing. But then like it kind of does like hurt your pride when you like are just like, oh well, I have to sit on this record, but everybody's already heard it anyway. You know what I mean? Like you can't, like, instead of like giving someone a physical copy, like they've already had it, so it's like it's taken the moment away, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's very much something that, and I don't know how old you are, but that's something that I grew up with, and I'm sure that at some point when you were younger, you grew up with too. The whole ritual of going out to buy a record that you haven't heard before, and then coming back to listen to it for the first time.
Yeah.
All right. So moving into the future, could we foresee, Full of Hell sort of taking any alternative approaches to releasing their music, disseminating their music, or will you just kind of stay the course that you're at now? Because it seems like the band has reached a certain level where at least continuing down this road is feasible for now.
I think we'll probably like stick to it. I mean, we'll do like when it comes to releasing music, we'll like release cassettes or something once in a while just for fun. But like we're just gonna keep like releasing records and CDs like as long as we can, as long as people have interest, and just gonna keep writing as much as we can.
Okay, and after this collaborative record that you guys have coming out with The Body, are you guys going to be doing a lot of live dates with them, some solo dates?
We actually have a European tour coming up with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a month-long European tour, and then we have a bunch of like one-off stuff, just us in the summertime, and then come in the summer, early fall, we're going to do a collaborative tour.
Okay. And after that whole process, are you guys going to get back to just kind of writing as the core band yourselves?
Yes, we already. It's crazy because I mean we just released a 7-inch that we recorded after the Body collab. Like we recorded the body collab in the summer, and then we recorded a new 7-inch like a couple months later, and that's out already. And then we have a split coming out, but I can't like announce anything with that yet. And then we're currently writing a new LP as well.
Where can people get a hold of that 7-inch if it's not sold out? We can put a link down in the description.
You can get it from our Bandcamp, which I think is just fullofhell.bandcamp.com.
Okay.
And then Bad Teeth Recordings is the record label that put it out.
Okay, we'll make sure to link to that, and we'll link over to that song that you guys had out with the body, and your last collaborative record with Merzbow, and I think we're gonna leave it there. I want to thank Spencer Hazard for coming on the show, talking about his band Full of Hell, the music that he has coming down the pipe, and just extreme music in general.
Cool, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you.